Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune. Perryn Keys here with Reed Darcey and Koki Riley, two of our fine young LSU beat writers. We are here to discuss not the Super Bowl, not Taylor Swift, not any of that nonsense. We are going to we're going to be here to discuss LSU baseball coming up right around the corner. It is officially baseball season. And, of course, the LSU women's basketball team taking care of business and getting back on a roll. We are here to do all that. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing?
Doing great. I thought the Super Bowl was awesome. Like, that was one of the most fun Super Bowls, I think, in a while.
It was a damn entertaining Super Bowl. I don't know about you, Koki.
Long Super Bowl, longest Super Bowl we've ever had, and great fourth quarter.
Is that right? Was it really the longest Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because the Pats Super Bowl was one drive and out, right?
That's true.
They took both drives and they went through the whole period. So
15-minute overtime.
We got entertained, and I now aspire to be able to dress up like Ben Affleck and humiliate anybody who loves me. In that kind of
that was the best commercial.
That was the best commercial.
Dunkin' Donuts,
easily.
that's very close to my heart. Ben Affleck, very close to my heart. Tom Brady, the whole thing. Matt Damon was just perfect.
We promised we wouldn't talk about the Super Bowl stuff, and here we are, a minute in, talking about Super Bowl stuff. We will get back on track. First things first, though, we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. Champion Wealth Strategies is a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL, financial member FINRA SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. We are here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels. Specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. We're there live every Monday and Thursday. If you don't catch us there, though, on Monday and Thursday live, you can catch us after the fact anytime on those same channels. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. Please subscribe to The Advocate. Obviously, we've got a lot going on. Before long here, we will have every sport under the sun at LSU going on, if you count spring football. But right now we've got LSU men's basketball, women's basketball, softball is already underway, gymnastics, and of course baseball here coming down the line. To keep up with everything, first of all, subscribe to The Advocate. You go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And then also sign up for our newsletter. You get everything delivered to your inbox, to your desktop, to your phone. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. Okay, so gentlemen, we are, first things first, baseball. Sort of unofficially here in Louisiana, whenever the Super Bowl ends, everybody sort of shifts their attention toward baseball.
As they should.
Seam head that you are, Koki, you would feel that way. No offense to Reed, who's covering the LSU women, and they will have their day in the sun, obviously, if they've not already. But LSU baseball is going to start up on Friday. It's VMI versus LSU at 2 p.m. Friday, almost like a regional, where they start in the early afternoon on Friday. It'll be in Alex Box Stadium on SEC Network Plus. And so that's where we start. Koki, obviously, they're coming off a national championship. They're going to try to do one of the hardest things there is to do, which is to repeat. And D1 baseball has them ranked number 4 behind Wake Forest, Florida, and Arkansas. First things first, does that feel about right? And, of course, we know that these things are going to change all the way throughout the season.
Yeah, I think they have enough question marks with the lineup, not in terms of talent, but just in terms of like proven production to say that they're not a slam dunk number 1 team. I think if you put them anywhere in the top 5, that would make sense to me, just given that this team has too much talent, not to put them in the top 5 and too much pitching depth. But at the same time, they're not the slam dunk number 1 like they were quite last season when they had so much returning offensive firepower when you have guys like Dylan Cruz and even like the likes of Gavin Dugas and Trey Morgan and whatnot. So, I think that's about right.
The lineup, we will get to the lineup on Thursday's podcast, but I thought we would take a good bit today to discuss the pitching staff. The pitching staff is going to be, it's going to be different. this year. Obviously, no Paul Skeens. And in all likelihood, we all know, first things first, we all know from having watched, college baseball now forever that, and really for that matter, if you want to talk about any kind of baseball team, the lineup, the pitching rotation, all that stuff is not going to look the same at the end of the season as it is at the start of the season. But for now, you think that there is a pretty, well, as close to set in stone as it can be for a weekend rotation, starting with Thatcher Hurd, which is a name, of course, that LSU baseball fans are already familiar with.
Yes, yeah, with Thatcher, I saw him throw a little bit on, what was it, Friday. He actually did struggle a little bit with his command and some of the issues that he had last season. I think he hit like 3 batters and 3 or 4 innings. It was a little rocky for him, but at the same time, we know his ability, right? Mm-hmm. And he has the talent to easily be a first-round pick and be one of the best pitchers in the SEC this season. It's just a matter of finding that consistency, especially when it comes to locating his stuff, because guy has a mid-90s fastball that can run up to 98. He has fantastic breaking stuff. That slider became a great weapon for him last season. So, yeah, I feel like he definitely has potential to have a huge year this year. And Jay Johnson has always been super high on him. So yeah.
So Thatcher, he obviously came up big in the Tigers national championship run last summer. And there are plenty of pitchers on staff who also made significant contributions to that championship run. But the Saturday guy, the number 2 guy right at this moment is right-hander Luke Holman, transfer from Alabama. Tell us about him.
Yeah, with Holman, he's got a really big curveball. Doesn't really light up the radar gun as much. He's more like 91 than 93, but he knows how to pitch. And I know that's like a really overused cliche when it comes to starting pitching, but there's just a stability with him and a consistency of what he's doing and where the ball's going, that you just have. I have the most confidence in him in terms of sticking in the rotation for the entire season, and I'd be surprised if he's not one of the at least 5-ish best starting pitchers in the SEC this season.
Interesting.
And yeah, he's really solid. He's a really solid pitcher. Even though he doesn't quite have like the explosive potential that someone like Hurd does, his stuff isn't quite as sharp. Even though that curveball is a very dangerous weapon for him. And you can kind of see that in the velocity. And I don't think he's going to be necessarily like a top 5 pick or anything, but he's solid. You know what you're getting out of him.
When you say he knows how to pitch, I mean, I think I know where you're going with that, but expound on that a little bit if you would.
I'd say a lot of that has to do with just a real consistency with location and knowing where the ball is going and understanding your strengths as a pitcher. He like that. I keep on mentioning the curveball, but he does a really good job of leaning on that pitch as a secondary offering. He just has. It seems like he has a pretty good feel for all of his pitches, and I think that accuracy and that has that kind of, I guess, use another cliche term, that pinpoint location, is there's just a stability there that's kind of hard to find, especially in the college game, in contrast to Hurd, for example, who has that explosive stuff, right? The mid-90s fastball that can reach up to 98, the fantastic slider, some of the other really good off-speed pitches. But we've also seen him, lose control sometimes,
right.
and leave too many pitches over the plate that can get hit against teams like Southern at the beginning of last year, for example, right? You're probably not going to get that with Holman too much this year. So there's a stability that he brings to the rotation that's definitely valuable.
Do you see, just one quick question, do you see Jay Johnson sort of like fiddling with the rotation a little bit and maybe at some points in the season, putting Holman on Friday night or Thatcher Hurd on Saturday and kind of moving them around and experimenting and see what works and sort of maybe finding the right matchup for the right pitcher based on the rotation?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the matchups, because I think that might depend a little bit on who pitches Friday and who pitches Saturday. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Luke Holman starts on opening day. Like, that wouldn't surprise me at all. and to be honest, he was because they pitched both pitchers during the scrimmage on Friday, and they threw the quote unquote big guns. Like Herring pitched that day, Ackenhausen pitched that day, Justin Lohr pitched an inning or two that day as well. And they played, I think it was Saturday, Sunday. I think they might play tonight too. But anyway, so yeah, like I kind of see them, as you said, sort of mixing and matching depending on who they're going up against. But if it's not Hurt or Holman, I think is going to be the Friday starter. I'd be really surprised if it was anybody else.
So the third person in the rotation, at least as LSU is sort of coming into the season, is a left-hander named Gage Jump, who transferred in. He followed Thatcher Hurd a year later, but he followed Thatcher Hurd in terms of having transferred from UCLA. Left-hander who's took a year and a half, if I'm not mistaken, to come back from Tommy John.
Yep.
Is that right? So just tell us a little bit about him and why he is at the moment looking like somebody who's going to be in the weekend rotation.
Yeah, they're very high on his 4-pitch mix. I believe it was a fastball, curveball, slider, changeup, and at least they say he has really good feel for all 4 pitches. I haven't had a chance to see him pitch in the scrimmages. He hasn't pitched a ton in the scrimmages, but yeah, and Jay Johnson has been recruiting him, has known him, and has been recruiting him hard since he was coming out of high school in California. And I mean, back when Jay was at Arizona. So they kind of had that familiarity there. And he also knew his brother, Hunter Jump, who played at Arizona State and then later played at Kentucky. And and Hunter's experience in Kentucky sort of convinced Gage to make the jump to the SEC. Yeah, I think he's kind of a wild card because, again, he hasn't pitched in a year and a half. But when he did pitch as a freshman, he was pretty impressive in the Pac-12, pretty decent baseball conference. So, yeah, he has the potential to be like to create a real 3-headed monster for LSU in the rotation. But they also aren't leaning on him to the point where they have to have him perform this season, right? Like if he struggles this year a little bit coming back from Tommy John and things don't go right immediately, they have plenty of options behind him, like Griffin Herring and Nate Ackenhausen, two guys who have started College World Series games basically.
That's right.
Herring didn't actually start, but he
might as well have.
He might as well have. Yeah, it was like 4 or 5 inning relief appearance. So yeah, when you have those sort of options behind Jump, like they're in a really good spot with the rotation.
This appears, and again, throughout the course of the season, as we've always seen, this appears to be a very, very deep pitching staff, one with a lot of options, and one that's very versatile. If I'm not mistaken, check me on this, Koki, because you're gonna remember this better. If I'm not mistaken, they got 7 left-handers. Is that right?
They have 10, including Jake Brown.
Gee whiz, that is a ton. I mean, I remember just not even 4 or 5 years ago, LSU went into the season with 1 left-hander, and he wound up, being injured, basically missing the entire year. I know Jay Johnson spoke on that.
Yeah.
Let's start with that about the importance of having a good full set of options from the left side.
It's about the matchups, right? I mean, You can mix and match, not just putting lefties on lefties, but if they're going up against a left-handed hitter who has trouble against velocity, they can go to Cam Johnson. If they're going up against a left-handed hitter who might be susceptible to hitting the ball on the ground and not hitting the ball very hard, then Justin Lohr could be an option there because Justin Lohr is more of a bottom of the strike zone sort of guy. So they have a bunch of just different options when it comes to these left-handed pitchers. So it's not just 10 guys who throw the same way. It's different. It's coming out at different angles. It's coming at different velocities. It's just different types of breaking pitches that come along with that. Guys who can go long, guys who can go short, young guys, old guys. They have just a plethora of options. They almost have more left-handed. They probably do have more left-handed pitching depth than they do right-handed pitching depth.
Yeah, they do,
which is crazy.
Yeah.
So I haven't really seen this at all.
You don't see that from a major league team.
No, exactly. That's what I mean. So what they have going with the amount of left-handed pitching they have is pretty special. In Jake Brown isn't really going to be. I don't think he's going to have a huge role as a pitcher this year because he's also probably going to be a starting outfielder for them. But he's the 10th. He'd be like the 10th option for them. That's why part of the reason why he's a hitter this season. So it's, again, they're just so deep with left-handed pitching. It's ridiculous.
So as you know, I asked you to come up with, we'll have incidentally to everybody who's listening or watching out there, we will have basically stories coming up every day at theadvocate.com leading up to the season opener on Friday. But as you know, as part of that, Koki, I asked you to come up with basically sort of your key relievers, your top 4 key relievers. And this is not an exhaustive list, obviously, but we came up with Griffin Herring, left-hander, Nate Ackenhausen, left-hander, Cam Johnson, left-hander, and right-hander Gavin Guidry, who LSU fans are obviously familiar with already. Just discuss a little bit. I know Jay Johnson said he, quote, trusts Griffin Herring with his life.
Yes.
And Ackenhausen, huh?
And as he should, he did trust Ackenhausen with his baseball life last year. And again, this goes back to you never know how a season's going to play out. Ackenhausen obviously, and check me if I'm wrong on this. He started a game. His first start ever was in
College
Omaha.
World Series. Yes.
Yeah, so that's this is how college baseball works in a lot of ways, and this is how baseball team works in a lot of ways. But just if you would, let's start with Griffin Herring and what his role is at the moment and what it could be and what he brings to LSU.
He could be a starter. I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes a starter by the second weekend. And he has that ability. We know he had a much bigger role on last year's team than I think a lot of people expected him to. And heading into this year, he probably has a smaller role than he would on most other teams in the SEC, let alone the country. So yeah, he's a talented left-handed arm who he hit around a little bit on Friday. But at the same time, there's just that history and that trust with him, and just that development piece that, he was just a freshman last year, right?
Yeah.
So he's actually draft eligible this year. That like most of the sophomores they have on this team were draft eligible. Like Gavin Guidry is another one. He's draft eligible this season. But he's going to be just a critical piece for them, and probably their top left-handed option outside of Gage Jump, and he could easily be the number 1 guy if something happens to Jump.
So how about Nate Ackenhausen? He was, again, we discussed this just now, but they had to have a start. This almost always happens, seems like it does, especially for a team that falls into the losers bracket. You have to have some guy who's never been in a situation like this before, and all of a sudden he gets put in this situation and he's nails. Yeah. Which is what Nate Ackenhausen did for LSU in Omaha. But just generally speaking, he seems like a jack of all trades, not quite the right way. Okay, you need me to do this, you need me to do that. You spot start, 3 innings, 1 inning. He seems to be able to fill potentially a lot of different roles if LSU needs him to this season. If I'm wrong.
No, absolutely. And he's just so comfortable in his own skin. And he's another guy who, quote unquote, knows how to pitch, right? And relies on that high fastball, really good feel for his breaking stuff. And he's not the most talented guy in the world, but he's just a very solid college pitcher, and everyone needs a guy like that. And last year he kind of had the injury issue in the middle of the season, and they don't need him quite as much as last year for the pure reason because they have so much pitching depth, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he's going to be a critical piece for this team as long as he's healthy, because again, he's a solid guy who what you're getting out of him every time he goes on the mound.
Right. Obviously, we'll get to Gavin Guidry here in a moment. Another person who came up as big as somebody could come up in the Tigers' march to the national championship last year. But I think for those who have really been paying attention, your hardcore LSU baseball fans, I think everybody is really excited to see what may come of Cam Johnson, a player who LSU didn't really, frankly, expect to come to campus. But star left-hander, number 1 recruit in the nation. Just tell us about him and tell us what his potential is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, like big left-handed pitcher, can throw the ball mid-90s up to 98 miles an hour, which is a really rare, especially from the left side. Especially from a college freshman. And he's working on that slider, and if he can really refine that pitch, and he's the sky's the limit for that kid. So,
Yep.
And it would be surprising if he's not a weekend starter, either by next year or at the very least the year after, because that's a kid who could have easily been a first-round pick.
Is it just a matter of developing that second and third pitch for Cam Johnson?
Yeah, just refining your secondary stuff. That's usually at this, once you get to this stage of the game, you're going from jumping from the high school level to the college level. It's that. It's learning how to control runners. It's some of those like next level things that you just have to control. For example, I'm not saying that he's a control problem. He doesn't really have a control problem, but yeah, like when you're as physically talented as he is, and it's sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit. Yeah, sure. We will discuss this opening weekend here, but first we will handle a bit of business. We will handle a little bit of business here. If you're watching, tuning in, or listening, you already know that the Advocate's always been the #1 destination for all things LSU. So please subscribe if you haven't already, whether that's our print edition or digital edition. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Stay up to date with everything, even if you do or don't subscribe, with our LSU newsletter. Get that delivered straight to your phone, to your inbox, to your desktop. Everything's going on under the sun, including football, if you count signing day and spring practice coming down the line. So every sport is going on right now. It's a lot to keep up with. And stay up to date with our LSU newsletter. To do that, you sign up at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday live on all our social channels, specifically our our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. We are there live. If you don't catch us live, you can catch us after the fact on that same channel. And of course, we are here on Apple, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And as always, on Monday and Thursday, we are brought to you by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more, go to Champion Wealth Strategies and championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. This is a fairly typical opening weekend. LSU doesn't typically open. They're going to go to Houston and play Texas and UL Lafayette and some sort of heavyweights like that, and before they get into conference. But typically they open with a quote unquote a couple of easier opponents. They're going to play VMI on Friday and Sunday. They're going to play Central Arkansas on Saturday and Monday. What do you expect to see out of this opening weekend? What do you want to see if you're an LSU baseball fan?
You want to see what does the offense look like? How are they? Because they've been during the fall. I think it was Jay Johnson or someone said this, but they were pretty dominated by the pitching in the fall. It's evened out ever since then a little bit, but offensively they've had some troubles against this pitching. Well, part of it's because it's LSU's pitching staff, right? So there's kind of a give and take there a little bit, but at the same time, you want to see, how good are the at bats that they're taking? How hard are they hitting the ball when they're hitting it? Because this with Jay Johnson, their strategy has always sort of been walks and extra base hits, right? And they don't have quite as much power as they had last year, and they're probably not going to be quite as disciplined at the plate as they were last year, and that's mostly because they don't have as much proven veteran experience in the lineup. Guys like Evan Dugas, guys like Dylan Cruz was the master at working the count and swinging at his pitch, right? And they are not going to have that as much this year because lineups mostly guys like sophomores and transfer like Michael Braswell, like those are sort of the guys that you're sort of leaning on now. So and a guy like Tommy White, who is a little bit more aggressive than maybe he should be at times, as good as he is, right? So I'm kind of interested to look at how many walks are they getting, how many counts are they working, like
pitch selection.
Yeah, pitch selection is going to be an interesting thing to sort of monitor throughout the season, and I kind of want to see where they're at to start the year. So. Is it because were there struggles during the preseason because of LSU's pitching staff, or was it because they need a lot more progress when it comes to
because they're not quite as
offense?
disciplined at the plate as you'd hope for them to be by the end of the season?
Yeah. So it's something just to monitor. If it's not good at the start, I don't think it's worth like panicking or anything like that. But I just think it's something to like keep an eye on really throughout the entire year, because if they're not at where they need to be by SEC play or by the end of SEC play, then that could be a big indicator as to what this team's odds are.
Right now, it's a good reminder, right, that baseball season is a long season.
Exactly.
You remember better than anybody that maybe with about a month and a half to go, people were fans were freaking out. Oh, well, these guys aren't going to get it done, and then next thing you know, they pull it all together. They certainly had the most talented team.
I'm glad you mentioned plate discipline, because I remember last year during the postseason run, Wilson did a great story about Gavin Dugas and how many times he got hit by pitches.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so now Gavin Dugas, some of those veteran guys at the top of the order are gone. Those guys are really good at getting hit by pitches. If you remember last year, they got hit so many times. Like, it just got on base. They walked so many times. So how do you replicate that? How do you find guys who can do that, who can get on base as often as guys like Dylan Cruz and Dugas did? What will the top of the order look like, and will they get on base as often as those guys? Probably not, but can they get close?
And,
Yeah.
And if they're more disciplined at the plate, that means they're probably taking more pitches. Taking more pitches means you're draining a little bit more life out of the starting pitcher. You're getting into the bullpen, and if we're talking about just the regular season, as we know, for years and years and years, you get into an SEC bullpen on Sunday afternoon. That's probably a beneficial thing for you.
Exactly.
You get toward the end of that bullpen, you might be able to tee off and make some hay.
And you're just being more selective at what pitches you swing at. And if you're swinging at the pitches you want to swing at, you're probably hitting them harder and you're probably hitting them further. And that was sort of the recipe. That was the philosophical recipe to their success last season. And I'm kind of curious to see, can that translate this year when you're relying more on guys like Paxton Kling? And
Right.
I think they're going to get that in someone like Mac Bingham, for example. Like Mac Bingham, from with the scrimmages I've been able to see, like he's been really, really solid. You know what you're going to get out of him. He's kind of like the Gavin Dugas replacement in my eyes, at least.
We will get into more detail on the LSU lineup and position players on Thursday, on Thursday's podcast. Obviously, that will be a day before opening day, and so we will go up and down the order and up and down the bench as we should. But we're going to turn focus now to the LSU women's basketball team, which has won its third straight game. They frankly struggled in the first half against Alabama on Sunday at the PMAC, and then boy did they turn it on in the third quarter. Outscored Alabama 30-9. They are now, as I said, they have now won 3 in a row. Reed, just give us your 2 cents, your sort of 30,000-foot view on where this team is right now.
Well, Kim Mulkey did something very interesting yesterday. She started the second half with Last-Tear Poa in the starting lineup in place of Haley Van Lith. And she went to a press. We haven't seen them press really at all during the SEC slate. They broke it out a few times during non-conference games, but we haven't really seen it since then. And that was really what flipped the switch for them. That was really what ignited them. I think in the first half yesterday, the first half was rough because they gave up so many open threes. They were not sharp defensively. They were out of position. They were miscommunicating. And Alabama did a great job exploiting that, finding open threes and hitting those threes. And that's why they got a 10-point lead at halftime. And so the counter that Mulkey and her staff should have sort of put out there, they put Poa out there because they needed her for the press. They needed her and her defensive strengths out there at the point of attack in the press because she's so good at moving her feet side to side, laterally. She's a much better point of attack defender than Haley Van Lith is. So they put her in there, and she really gave them a spark. She played the best game of her career, I'd say. She played 30 minutes, which is by far a career high.
Yep.
And she really was the straw that stirred the drink throughout the whole second half. She was really active on the defensive end. She got out in transition. She made great passes in transition, really just made a lot of great plays. And when you combine that with what Angel Reese did, Angel Reese was phenomenal. They really turned it around, and it was an important win for them because, you can't lose those types of games at this point in the regular season. You have to win these types of games if you want to if you want to start your tournament at home. So I think it was important that they turned it around.
As you mentioned, 30-plus minutes, 11 points, 4 assists, offensively speaking, for Last-Tear Poa. She has averaged, Sunday skewed it a little bit, but she has averaged 25 minutes or thereabouts in the past 3 games.
Yep.
This was coming just at a time when we were saying, hey, look, they've got to do something to find that, this is a short roster now with the injury to Samaya Smith, the absence, departure of Kateri Poole, and so they need more. They need to be able to find a place to gain more depth. And Last-Tear Poa obviously is an experienced player, and she's her contributions. Tell me if I'm wrong, Reed, but her contributions are coming right on time.
Exactly. Yeah, you need this. You need this now, because they don't really have much margin for error, as we've discussed. You lose a couple more games, you risk not hosting the first 2 rounds of the tournament, so that's big. And we talked about this a couple podcasts ago. When she plays well, she kills 2 birds with 1 stone.
Mm-hmm.
She allows Hailey Van Lith to move off the ball where she's more comfortable, where
Right.
she's more natural. So it allows her to bring out a better version of Hailey Van Lith. And when she plays more, that means that some of the LSU starters don't have to play as many minutes. And they're fresher down the stretch. They're fresher in the second half in case they get into a close game. I think Rab had a great column last week on the advocate.com about how, Last-Tear Poa, she might be the key to unlocking the best version of this team, just because when she's playing well, she solves both of those problems for
Right.
LSU. And she was great. She was huge. I really like watching her play defense. She moves her feet really well, and I think that's something that really LSU needs: the defensive end and the table setting ability on the offensive end.
It stands to reason that we may be seeing more minutes from her. Not only out of necessity, but because she has played so well in the past few games.
Yeah, and fans are going to fixate on the starting lineup, and it'll be a question to see if she starts the next game. They don't play again until next Monday. I wouldn't be totally shocked if she starts the next game, given how much Kim Mulkey values her defense. But what really matters is when you look at the box score, how many minutes they played
That's
total.
right.
It's not about who starts. It's about who finishes first, and it's about who plays the most minutes and how they distribute the minutes. So, Hailey Van Lith, she's going to play a ton of minutes regardless of whether she starts or not. It's just, it's not a huge deal if she comes off the bench. She's going to be playing 25, 30 minutes every given night. So it'll be interesting to see if the rotations change a little bit. But I wouldn't take too much stock into if Kim Mulkey decides to make a change to the starting lineup.
You mentioned very briefly Angel Reese. Ho hum.
Yeah,
27 points, 19 rebounds against
It's crazy
Alabama.
how we just expect this from her now. 27, 19, and 6 to I think a couple blocks and a steal. Like she was unbelievable, and we sort of went unnoticed because we just expect that from her.
Yep.
That's her. She's
Yep.
gotten 15 plus rebounds consistently the last few games. That's her. That's what she does.
And how much of a difference does it make when she and Anissa Morrow can really clean up on the offensive glass?
Oh, it's huge.
Because that's so you're taking possessions away from the other team first and foremost, and obviously giving yourself more opportunities to score.
I've got the numbers right here. LSU out-rebounded Alabama 54-34. They had 21 offensive rebounds, and Alabama had 12 offensive rebounds. So that's 9 extra possessions, get you 9 extra shots. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Up next, so we
My
discussed.
one
Go ahead.
quick question for Reed is like, why haven't they pressed more throughout the season when they? I guess to answer my own questions because they have a pretty light bench, but I think the pressing would make sense just because you have an athletic advantage over almost every single team you're going up against, and the more space you open up for your athletes, the better it is for you on both sides of the ball.
Yeah,
right?
when you have to ask your players to play so many minutes, the press would wear them down.
That's the problem.
I think so. That's the problem. I don't think they can do it consistently, but they can trot it out in spurts. I think that might be something you see going forward. And the other thing is, Kim Mulkey has mentioned this: the 3 starting guards, Hailey Van Lith, Flau'jae Johnson, Michaela Williams. She said their guards aren't really, the word she's been using is fleet of foot. Our guards aren't really fleet of foot, which means they can't move their feet really well. They're susceptible to get beat off dribble penetration, which is something that happened a lot during the first half of the Alabama game. So if they start pressing, then you're susceptible to, the
them blow
opposing
by you.
guards blowing right by you and dribbling right by you, and then they get in transition, they get, they get numbers advantages, and then they get easy buckets. So I think it makes sense why LSU hasn't used it too much, but it's something that they can, dabble with a little bit in the next few games.
It's interesting that you said that about Flage, because I think Flage
Flage is a really good
pretty
defender.
well.
Yeah, Flage is a really good defender. I think Poa is probably their best defender in the backcourt. But when she says fleet of foot, I think she was more referring to Haley Van Lith and Michaela Williams.
Okay,
I think.
So, as we mentioned many times already on this podcast, this is a sort of a weird year in the SEC. You have LSU and South Carolina toward the top of the NET rankings, and that's about it. LSU plays at Texas A&M next, followed by Auburn at home. Auburn, of course, surprised them on the road about a couple of weeks ago, and then Tennessee, and they go to Tennessee. Texas A&M an NET rating of 30, Auburn 56, Tennessee 49. What do you expect out of these next three games?
I expect LSU to win. I think against Auburn, it'll be at home, and they'll be really motivated to give it right back to them. A&M can scare them. A&M's got a really good defense, one of the best defenses in the country, but their offense isn't quite as prolific as their defense, and LSU's got such a good offense that they can probably outscore them, even if their defense is playing well. So when you look at the schedule, the one you circle is Tennessee. Of course, just because the Lady Vols are the Lady Vols, but they're not. I had higher hopes for them. They had a couple injuries. They played a really difficult schedule, but they've lost a couple games here recently. They're not the Tennessee that they usually are.
Yes.
They're dangerous, and it's going to be really difficult for LSU to beat them on the road, especially. But LSU is better than all the teams they got. So they should get through this if all things go right for them. They should get through this last stretch of 6 games with maybe one loss.
They're better than all the teams left on their schedule, but by that same token, they were better than Auburn.
Yes,
and
Mississippi
went
State.
to Auburn and for that matter, yes, Mississippi State and as we've seen and as Kim Mulkey has said over and over and over again, they're going to get everybody's best shot from now all the way through the postseason. They right now look like they're going to be a number 3 seed, which of course would have them hosting the first weekend, which is in my mind the most important thing because again, I know we've discussed this at least a little bit on previous podcasts. If you're a number 3 seed or anywhere really in the top 4, you'll probably make it through the first weekend, and then a team like LSU, there's a real distinct chance that on the second weekend they wind up facing the number 1 seed in whichever bracket they're in, and it might be a pick'em game.
Right.
Talent for talent, they might be as talented as the number 1 seed, whichever number 1 seed they're going to go up against in the NCAA tournament. So it's going to be an interesting month and a half here as we go down the road. We will be here for all of it, of course. We will be here for the start of baseball season. We all know that in this town and in this state, once the Super Bowl wraps up, that signifies for so many that it's time to turn to baseball. So we will be here for all of it, of course. The Advocate's always been the number 1 destination for LSU baseball coverage. You all know that. So please subscribe. Subscribe to The Advocate. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. To stay up with everything LSU related, you can sign up for our newsletter. That's at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday with the LSU Sports Insider. You can catch us on all our social channels, specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. Subscribe to that YouTube channel if you would. If you don't catch us live, you can catch us after the fact on that same channel. And, of course, we are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And, of course, we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. Please go to championwealthstrategies.com and find out more and plan like a champion today. For these 2 fine gentlemen right here, Koki Riley and Reed Darcey, and for Robert Young behind the glass, my name is Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.